Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarottam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjalimanatosmi laye sambodhayet chittam vikshiptam shamayet punaha sakashayam vijaniyat samapraptam na chalayet. Om. So recent weeks have been I have been a little irregular. I have been traveling, and then I had a little minor sniffles, but I made a big deal of it, and then I missed a few classes. So we'll come back and then to catch up and reorient ourselves because we are going to move to the Ashtanga Yoga part of the second chapter to reorient. I thought we will review and also have a little quiz of what we have studied so far in chapter 2. So when we look at the entire Yoga Shastra, whom did Patanjali Maharshi have in his radar when he said, whom am I going to write this Yoga Shastra? Who is the adhikari for this? So I'm just trying to get into his mind. He must have looked at in the society, and there is one group of people who are born with certain abilities, because we are talking about 4th century, 5th century, before the current era, when the culture was very different. I'm sure he would have seen an extraordinarily enlightened people amidst the society, and then who were also very quick to learn and who were adept in abhyasa, in practice. So he thought, okay, here there are extraordinary minds, people like Janaka Maharaja, there is people like Sri Rama, Sri Krishna, and then there are people like the Buddha, and the Buddha, of course, was not yet there at Patanjali's time. And we also see in the more contemporary context that we see people like Adi Shankara, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, Vivekananda and others. For them, they can attain samadhi very quickly. So here is a point for us to consider. Which chapter addresses the mind such as Adi Shankara? So I would say chapter 1, the Samadhi Paada. And in the Samadhi Paada, what would be, say, 2 statements or 2 sutras by listening which the 8-year-old or a 6-year-old Adi Shankara can formulate the entire Advaita Vedanta? Suppose, because Shankara also studied the Yoga Shastra. So he would have probably said that, okay, how does Patanjali Maharshi define? Then he talks about Chittavritti Nirodha, and when he's talking about Chittavritti Nirodha, he talks about the 5 different kinds of state of mind, which he further subdivides into Klishta and Aklishta. So I would say that he heard one statement: all our chittavrittis can be either klishta or aklishta. And one statement he has heard: using the power of aklishta vritti, manage klishta vritti. So how can we do it? By means of abhyasa and vairagya. Don't you think this much is enough for a mind like Shankara? Here is Chittavritti. This Chittavritti is either Klishta Vritti or Aklishta Vritti. And using the power of Klishta Vritti through Abhyasa and Vairagya, Klishta Vrittis can be managed, and thus the person gets Chitta Vritti Nirodha and he gets into Samadhi. We will call such people as Uttamottama Adhikaris. Then he looks at the majority of the population. And when you look at the majority of the population, for them, their minds are not normally available at all. Because it is constantly in the flux of the samsara. It is all the time in Aklishta Vritti only. In fact, I would dare to use even the word that the maximum number of people are absent-minded. Because as far as controlling of the Chitta Vritti is concerned, their mind is definitely absent. So Patanjali Maharshi must have said that I have to do something about these people. So here is the first point for the floor for our discussion. What can you do to motivate this second category? What can we do? What can the Ishvara do? What can the world do to motivate the second category of the people? Open for discussion. So if you look at the text itself, the one factor that can actually inspire anyone to look at their mental state, isn't it klesha? So the motivating factor for the second group of people is that there is klesha. And look at the beauty of klesha. Klesha is impartial. Suppose we say that only I am afflicted by one of the kleshas. It can be raga dvesha. It can be my fear for my existence. Abhinivesha is there. Fear of death, whom does it spare? It doesn't spare anybody. That means klesha is impartial. Klesha is inevitable. And klesha doesn't spare anybody. And therefore Patanjali Maharshi must have said, klesha is the real motivating factor for the second category to look at their mind. Kleshas are there for the first category also. Because as I said, this is impossible. It is impartial. Klesha is impartial. Even Adi Shankara gets fever. Even Ramana Maharshi gets cancer. So klesha doesn't spare anybody. But what is the first category? For the first category, at the very suggestion of klesha, they take charge of their mind. You look at the situation for a 8-year-old Adi Shankara who has gone for a bhiksha, and he stops in front of a old single woman living all alone in great penury. The only thing she could offer him was a shriveled piece of leaven. And normally if he had said, and if the householder said, there is nothing to give you for bhiksha, usually the second category person would have moved on and gone to a second house. But look at the mind of this yogi. He sees the klesha of that woman, and then he understands and he goes into the examination of klesha right away. That he showered with golden lemons is a different issue. But now we are talking about the mind of the sadhaka. So therefore, I was drawing the following conclusions that Patanjali Maharshi has two categories in his mind. For the one category, whether they experience the klesha or they see the klesha in somebody, that triggers them to get into yoga, abhyasa, vairagya, using their aklishta vritti to neutralize the klishta vritti, and they go into samadhi right away. So we have the motivating factor for both the categories is actually klesha. Now the next question is, where is this klesha coming from? Where is the origin of the klesha? We can say that it is coming from the world. We can say it is coming from my own body, or from my thoughts, or from my understanding. What are all these things? All of them are drishya only. Everything is drishya. So, the motivating factor is a klesha caused by drishya. That's another conclusion we can probably draw from what all we have studied so far. And therefore a solution has to be given. And what is the solution that Patanjali Maharshi gives? What sutra or what instruction can Yoga Sutra give to the, quote, absent-minded? That's why in the second chapter, right away, the sage jumps and says, theorizing, argumentation, philosophical discussion doesn't work. We have studied Upanishads. By the time Patanjali Maharshi came on the scene, the Upanishads were already there. Upanishads didn't work. How many people got into samadhi by reading Upanishads? Then Karma Kanda was there in the Veda itself. Karma Kanda also did not seem to have given any control on the mind, because if Swarga was a posthumous project, and still even material wealth was also in the grip of a few, but Patanjali's interest was in helping a large population, and therefore he instructed right away in the very first sutra of the second chapter, here is the solution, start Kriya Yoga. And what tools are required for Kriya Yoga? Nothing. Tapas. Tapas is your own project. Tapas is something you do. You don't need a guru. You don't need anybody to hold your hand. You don't need any material resources. What about study of scripture? Again, you can do yourself. Worship of Ishvara, you can do yourself. So he completely gave the skill of handling the klishta vrittis to this absent-minded group. You can see what a paradigm shift has taken in the development of spiritual thought with Patanjali. So then, the next question. Can Kriya Yoga weaken klesha? Is the next question. Just because you offer a solution, you do Kriya Yoga, can that solve the question? It's a problem. So let's also do a reading of the sutras as we continue our thinking. Tapaswadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhanani Kriya Yoga. So you do meditation, tapas, you study the scripture, and you dedicate yourself to Ishvara. He brought these three concepts. And then he did not say that tapasvadhyaya Ishvara pranidhana leads to samadhi. There is no statement. Immediately what he is saying is samadhi bhavanarthaha klesha tanu karanarthascha. Second sutra. The purpose of Kriya Yoga is for the sake of weakening the kleshas. So for the sake of weakening the kleshas, you do tapasvadhyaya Ishvara pranidhana. Then in the third sutra, he defined klesha as avidya, aspita, ragadvesha, abhiniveshani, kleshaha. So, tapasvadhyaya Ishvara pranidhana has to be done so that all the kleshas are weakened. Kleshas are those that create the klishta vritti, klishta chitta vritti. The difficult chitta vritti is created by klesha, and that klesha has to be weakened. For that you take this Kriya Yoga, tapasvadhyaya Ishvara pranidhana, and then he actually later on in the instruction for Ashtanga Yoga, he gives us the prerequisite to do Kriya Yoga. Tapasvadhyaya Ishvara pranidhana he gave. So can I just jump into meditation? What skill do I have to do meditation? And therefore he says, even to get the readiness for doing tapasvadhyaya Ishvara pranidhana, if you look at the 32nd sutra of the second chapter, which we have not yet studied in this round of study, 232, Shaucha Santosha Tapasvadhyaya Ishvara Pranidhanani Niyamaha. To get the competence to do Kriya Yoga, you have got to develop purity, physical, emotional and intellectual purity, Shaucha, and also you must develop contentment and being in a state of a happy mind. So tapasvadhyaya Ishvara pranidhana is the solution for our second category. And then why it should be repeated again in 232? And then prefix it with Shaucha Santosha. It is because to emphasize the importance of Kriya Yoga and also the effectiveness of Kriya Yoga. When we simply say I am emphasizing Kriya Yoga is important, Patanjali Maharshi says, I am only developing a theory for you. But he also says it's going to be effective. Where is the statement of Patanjali that it is effective? Kleshatanu karanarthascha. The purpose of Kriya Yoga is for the sake of weakening all the kleshas. That means this is effective. So two concepts in one stroke of genius of one sutra, he attracts the intelligent mind, which is absent, to become present. That's the power of this beautiful beginning of the second sutra. So, but then kleshas are there. Kleshas are going to affect. Now, we have to raise the question, why do kleshas arise? What do you think? Why do even kleshas arise in the first place? It is because of contact. Samyoga. He talks about samyoga also. Drashta, drishya, drishi, drishyayoho, samyogaha, heya hetu. Who is going to talk about that? As soon as the contact comes, when the contact comes because of samyoga or the contact with the world, coupled with the chaos of our phenomenal existence, out of the blue, the house you are renting, the person says, I want the house in 1 month. What did you do to motivate, to make that happen? It just comes, isn't it? Why does it come? Because the world is there. When there is the phenomenal existence, then all these things will happen. So how does a yogi prepare himself? So the text will say, because I am in contact with the world, klesha is inevitable. I cannot change the world. That's why Patanjali Maharshi doesn't talk about changing the world. He talks about preparing ourselves to face the world. It's a method to insulate ourselves. A great klesha hit the entire world for the last 2 years. So what did people do? Those who did not understand the origin of klesha, those who did not understand that samyoga is the one which causes hardship, they succumbed, isn't it? But those who understood that samyoga has got to be controlled started getting vaccination, putting on mask. Look at that purely in the binoculars of Yoga Shastra. Non-contact with the world was the solution, isn't it? The moment you wore the mask, to that extent, contact with the world is stopped. Next important question. Why Patanjali recommends tapasvadhyaya Ishvara pranidhana? Corollary to that question is, why does he recommend it in this sequence? It could have been reversed. Religion would have come back and told us, you worship God, everything will be over, everything will be fine. He is Anatha Rakshaka. So go sit, do puja. But Patanjali Maharshi, why did he put Ishvara Pranidhana in the end of the threesome? Is another thing for to see. First of all, what tapas does is, it eliminates the adverse effects of an indisciplined lifestyle. Agree? Because later on in 232, what does he say? Shaucha Santosha. Purity and tripti and a joyous disposition, when that is already there under our belt, then what does tapas do? Tapas actually prevents adverse effects of an indisciplined lifestyle. Say shaucha. If we are mindful about what we eat, it is part of shaucha. It keeps our body healthy. If we are mindful about what we think, if we are mindful about how we communicate, then by diet and exercise we take care of our body. By sattvika ahara, pranayama, In fact, the Chandogya Upanishad, the Bhuma Vidya, someday we will study that. Ultimately, Sanat Kumara, the teacher, concludes what you put into your body. Ahara Shuddhau Sattva Shuddhi. What I eat, what I feed to my eyes, what I feed into my ears of the sound, all of them is ahara. Then you are having purity. Sattvika ahara, sattvika pranayama. When all of these things happen, tapas is extremely effective in preventing an indisciplined lifestyle. Discipline is not limited only to going to work on time. It's only the mechanics of discipline, that is all. I can be at my work exactly on time, but my mind may not be there in the work. That is also indiscipline only. Yat duram, yat duraradhyam, yaccha dure vyavasthitam, tat sarvam tapasa sadhyam, tapohi durakdikramaha. There is a beautiful Shastra Vakya. Yat duram, whatever is far away, a great travel has to be taken. Yat dure vyavasthitam, which doesn't come to me. See, sometimes there are things which are far away. With some effort, they come to me. Suppose I cannot get out of my bed because I am not well. I can always take the phone and call the grocery store and ask them to deliver. Where is the grocery? Dure. That which is far away, by means of a phone call, dure vyavasthitam, grocery which is far away, can be brought to my door. But there are some which will not come to me. What do we do? How can we get it? The Shastra says, tat sarvam tapasa sadhyam. All of that can be achieved by tapas. Tapohi durate kramaha means tapas is indispensable. Everything else is dispensable. And tapas cannot happen without saucha santosha. And therefore, Patanjali Maharshi picks up tapas as the first of the three practices. And not Ishvara Pranidhana to begin with. Then he starts, okay, with tapas, what did we do? We became mindful, we got disciplined, but then what should I do with my mind? What do I know about my mind? Nothing. Therefore he introduces Swadhyaya. What does Swadhyaya do? It gives insight about ourselves. Because it is Swa Adhyayam, Adhyayana of myself. And how can there be Adhyayana of myself without tapas? Because I have to put myself in the second category of the people who are absent-minded. I must accept I am absent-minded. And then I must take to Shaucha Santosha and do tapas. And what to meditate? Upon what I should do? How should I know that a particular attitude, a particular thought, a particular action neutralizes a particular klesha? There are 5 kleshas. Tell me the exact algorithm that is got by Swadhyaya. It gives insight about ourselves. For example, you chant Vishnu Sahasranama. You chant the Shanti Mantra. By knowing the meaning, it is study, you make this studying. Then it creates a mental prop. So this is where you do dhyana. For example, I'm right up from the top of my head, I'm thinking Uttarano Dushkritiha Punyo Duskrishtanashanaha. You take any phrase. One who uplifts Mahavishnu, by Mahavishnu's grace, I am even standing on this earth. If Mahavishnu, as the Adhipati of Prithvi, was not there, why is it that if I step into a body of water, I sink? But I stand on firm ground, I don't sink. What is it that is making it happen? So we start realizing, and then we start realizing that because of Swadhyaya, because you have studied Vishnu Sahasranama, now you say that how many tools are provided by the drishya, by the world, to deal with klesha. And then, what about speech? In speech, the quality of speech, Lalita Sahasranama talks about it. Para pratyakchiti rupa pashyanti paradevata. This is Swadhyaya. When you are doing Swadhyaya, it says, let my speech not come from just my mouth. That's Vaikari. Let what I speak be centered in my heart. Let it come from the Para Devata. Swadhyaya does this. And that has to follow tapas. So quest of excellence can happen only by means of Swadhyaya. Otherwise, why should, in chapter 9, verse number 27 of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna should say, Yat karoshi yadashnasi yajjuhoti dadasi yate yat tapasyasi kaunteya tat kurushva madarpanam. Whatever you are doing, whatever you are eating, whatever you are offering as your contribution to the world, whatever you think, yat tapasyasi. So why should I do tapas? Is it just because Patanjali Maharshi says, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives a commentary by saying, whatever you think, yat tapasyasi, that has to be done to remove klesha. How can you remove klesha? Tat kurushva madarpanam. When you do with Ishwararpana Buddhi. What is Ishwararpana Buddhi? Ishwara Pranidhana. So now you can see how structured is the concept. You cannot change the order. Suppose I simply say, I am going to do Ishwara Pranidhana, I am a bhakta. And you have heard a lot of people say that I don't care about philosophy, I don't care about logic, I don't care about studying the scripture. All I have got is bhakti for Ishvara. Then a small klesha will come. Avidya klesha doesn't bother a emotional devotee. Asmita doesn't bother an emotional devotee. Ragadvesha bothers, but he will not know that it is bothering him. Abhinivesha catches him. It crushes the person. So, therefore, if we have to practice the presence of the mind, practicing the presence of the mind is practicing the presence of God. Therefore, he said Ishvara Pranidhana. How much he must have thought. I don't know how much more he thought. This is what I could think of what Patanjali Maharshi must have been thinking in the arrangement of these sutras. I wish I was sitting in his class when he was teaching.
You may have been sitting there then, Shraddha.
then now you have got to home in. Okay, I'm going to do tapaswadhyaya Ishvara pranidhana. Among the kleshas, what am I going to focus upon? Patanjali Maharshi has to bring me there, isn't it? If he says, Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityuhu dhruvam janma mritasya cha, whoever is born must die, whoever is dead must be born. How many times have we heard that? Has Abhinivesha gone? So what is Patanjali Maharshi is, he says, hey, the most challenging klesha is avidya. May your tapaswadhyaya Ishvara pranidhana be directed towards avidya, laser sharp focus on avidya. So the fourth sutra says, avidya kshetram uttaresham prasaptatanu vichinno dharanam. Don't do palliative treatment. Go to the root. Avidya kshetram. Ignorance is the field that is creating all the kleshas. Then of course he defines what avidya is. Anitya shuchi dukkha anatmasu nitya shuchi atmakhyatihi avidya. This sutra is very, very important to contemplate in Swadhyaya. Identification of what is impermanent and permanent, it has to happen in Swadhyaya. That is where Krishna will come and say, Ajo nitya shashvatoyam puranaha. That comes only from scriptural study. So then he has also got to talk about from where this ego arises, identification of the seer with the seen, drak darshanayoho ekatmata eva asmita. Sutra number 6. Ashtanga yoga practice is to neutralize asmita. And of course he says that experience of pleasure leads to desire and emotional attachment. Sukhanushayi ragaha. Unhappiness leads to aversion, hatred. Dukkhanushayi dveshaha. Swarasavahi vidushopi tatha arudaha abhiniveshaha. Number 9, where he says, this abhinivesha, clinging to oneself, does not spare even the learned. Which means that mere swadhyaya is not enough. Swadhyaya has got to be supported on one side by tapas and on another side by Ishvara pranidhana. That is how Swadhyaya has to be fortified. That fortification is necessary if someday, somehow, again, by the grace of God and by Swadhyaya and by tapas, somehow we overcome the fear of death. So the idea of avidya is very significant. In all the Indian wisdom literature, avidya is used, different terminologies are used. Say, take for example Upanishad, it calls it as Maya. That is one which covers the illusion that covers truth, Satyam, and confuses the mind. And that is why the mind becomes absent. And the mind cannot identify the difference between Satya and Mithya. Mithya means appearance. It cannot differentiate. Look at the Buddha wisdom. Buddha talked about Pratitya Samutpada, doctrine of dependent origination. We looked at the Hridaya Sutra, the Heart Sutra the other day. And avidya becomes the basis of even ego. So what is this egoism? It is when we mistake the swaswarupa, the essential nature, with the phenomenal material world. Aham sthulaha, I am obese. Aham krishaha, I am too lean. Aham dhanavan, I am a wealthy person. person, aham vidvamsaha, I'm a learned person. All of these things are the manifestations of this asmita. So next, Sutras 10 to 16 address the process of removing kleshas. A systematic process has to be established. So he says, te pratiprasavaheyaha sukshmaha. Kleshas can be avoided by reversing their course. Then how can you do it? How can you reverse the course? By means of meditation, dhyana. There is a difference between swadhyaya, tapas and dhyana. What you have achieved in tapas and swadhyaya, ishvara pranidhana, has to be re-energized, relived in contemplation, in dhyana. Yat karoshi yadashnasi, when Krishna says, when you are doing it, whatever you do, you say Krishnarpana. But we must be able to say that even when we are not doing anything, then also there must be a Krishnarpana buddhi. And that can be happen in dhyana heyaha tat vrittayaha. Look at it. Look at Patanjali. He brings back the word vrittayaha. Tapas can create vritti, isn't it? Chitta vritti can be created by tapas. Chitta vritti can be created by shaucha. I am very pure, so I don't want to touch anybody because I have taken a shower. Is that the right chitta vritti? Because it is causing asmita. I am pure, I am holier than the other person. Therefore, dhyana, he is talking about dhyana heyaga. We saw that vritti is turning of the mind. And in this turning of the mind, there is klishta and aklishta. We already saw this. Those who do dhyana identify the klishta vritti and aklishta vritti. Kriya yoga, tapaswadhyaya, ishvara pranidhana, ashtanga yoga, abhyasa vairagya, all of these things will, what it does is, it will start working on the klishta vrittis. Think about this. There is so much power and energy in ragadvesha, isn't it? If such an amount of force is there in ragadvesha, in priti vishwasa also there is equal amount of force. Equal amount, and sometimes I can even say more forceful than even ragadvesha. In priti vishwasa. Priti is not raga. So in priti vishwasa, what in dhyana a person does is, he will use priti vishwasa energy to counter the energy of ragadvesha. Where does it happen? Dhyana. In dhyana, tat vrittaya. Which vritti? Ragadvesha vritti, avidya, asmita, abhinivesha vritti will get reversed in dhyana by means of pratipaksha bhavana. The opposite thinking can happen only in meditation, and that's why he moved that into first chapter. Pratipaksha bhavana to first chapter. Now the question is again, all right, all this is fine, but where did this, what is the origin of this klesha? So in the 12th sutra he said, klesha mulaha karmashayaha drishta adrishta janma vedaniyaha. Karmashaya is a technical term here. Karmashaya is every sukha dukkha anubhava will go and accumulate itself as subliminal impressions called vasana and samskara. This vasana and samskara is rooted in klesha. Therefore, karmashaya klesha mulaha. And they, how do they result? They result in present and future klesha. So therefore, as long as the original repository remains, 13th Sutra, Sati Mule Tadvipakaha Jati Ayu Bhogaha. As long as this source is there, Karmashaya exists, then I will give rise to number of births, each birth having a span of life and each birth giving experiences, and in every birth I experience death, and in every birth I am afraid of death, therefore I am afraid of death even when I am alive, because it has become a very, very deep rooted practice. आदत पड़ गया है to be afraid. ते ह्लाद परितापफलाः पुण्या पुण्यफलहेतुत्वात् पुण्या पुण्यहेतुत्वात्. According to the nature of the action, punya and apunya, they create good and bad. In dhyana, what we do is we start talking about punya, apunya. And how do we know what is punya? Through Shaucha Santosha. He's trying to lead us to that concept, saying, building a case for why we should practice purity. Parinamataapa samskara dukkhaihi gunavritti virodhacha dukkhameva sarvam vivekinaha. What does a wise man know? Due to fluctuations, due to changes, qualities of guna, the nature of conditioning, samskara, even pleasant things have the potential for sorrow. A person doesn't get married. He is already 27, 28 years old. Dukkha, I have not got married. Okay, you get married. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, no child, dukkha. So as soon as I get married, there was a bit of sukha. Then no child, dukkha. Then they taking care of the child, pleasure, dukkha. Child goes to college, dukkho, dukkha. Child gets married, again dukkha. Everywhere there is dukkha. So he says, Heyam dukkham anagatam. Please don't think it is a tragedy. Do you feel the pressure of the klesha? Wherever the pressure of the klesha is there on me, that is called as dukkha. It need not be something that for which you shed tears. It's not sorrow. Here, pain, heyam dukkham anagatam. We can avoid pain of the future. What a statement of confidence. Tell me, how can you get a more powerful motivating speaker? Hey, it is possible for you to neutralize your future dukkha. All you have to do is tapasvadhyaya Ishvara pranidhana. That's the key sutra. Take to tapasvadhyaya. Suffering is inherent in all changes. Even when it is not changing, there is an anxiety that there is going to be a change. There is an anxiety. The text is not suggesting a psychological shift. It is not saying that, okay, you accept whatever is. Yadyad bhavyam bhavata bhagavan purva karmana rupam. Whatever happens in the future, let it happen based on purva karma. Kulashekara Muni can say that because his yoga was of a different caliber. By that time, his Ishvara Pranidhana had perfected. He has already finished Saucha, he has already finished Santosha, he has done Tapas, he has done Swadhyaya, comes to Ishvara Pranidhana level. At that point of time in Mukundamala Stotra, he can see, he can tell, Yadyad Bhavyam Bhavata Bhagavan Purva Karma Anurupam. Purva Karma Anurupam Because of the Purva Karma, whatever has to happen, let it happen. He is not saying, whatever I am going to do karma tomorrow, whatever consequence is there for my action tomorrow, let it happen. It doesn't do. It doesn't say. Can you see the nuance there? I have no control on what happened in the past. And therefore, whatever is the consequence of Purva Karma Anurupam, let it happen. Kulashekara Muni does not rise. Whatever outcome is there for what I do tomorrow, let anything happen. If he had said that, we would not have read Mukundamala. Purva Karma Anurupam. So that means the psychological shift is not saying whatever happens, happens. Whatever has happened will have consequences, but whatever is going to happen in future, I am going to take charge of that. What action? I am going to take action to remove future klesha. It is not a mere resignation to fate. If it is a resignation that dukkha is inevitable, then it is fatalistic. Here it is being proactive to eliminate the future dukkha. So we come to the next section, which we studied and just concluded, Sutra number 17 to 27. Patanjali Maharishi takes a deeper look at the seen and the seer, drishya and adrishya. So, before coming to that, in Ishvara Pranidhana, what he is doing is, he has done tapas, he has studied the scripture, Swadhyaya, and he has also done Ishvara Pranidhana. In having studied Ishvara Pranidhana, he has to sit down and evaluate, has it weakened the klesha? See, at every step of the way, I did tapas. After tapas, how many kleshas have become weak? Then I took to Swadhyaya. How much more klesha have been neutralized? Ishvara Pranidhana I am doing. Ishvara Pranidhana quality, how is it? How is the quality of Ishvara Pranidhana I am doing? Am I asking Ishvara to remove my kleshas? If I am asking Ishvara to remove my kleshas in future, heyam dukkham anagatam, then I am handing over my responsibility to Ishvara. Isn't it? And Ishvara does not interfere. We know that very well. Ishvara does not take my papa. Ishvara does not take my punya. Remember, we have studied this in Bhagavad Gita. Nadatte. Remember? He is not the one who is going to take up my punya or take up my papa. So, what is the quality of Ishvara Pranidhana? Remember, whoever was there in our study of Bhagavata, the Prathamaskanda, second chapter, 6th verse has got a beautiful support for this. Savai pumsam paro dharmaha. For the human beings, the greatest dharma, yato bhaktihi adokshade, where a person has got bhakti for Mahavishnu. And how should it be? Ahaituki. No agenda, no reason. And apratihata, that which is unbroken. Ahaitiki, apratihata, yaya atma suprasidati. Where the atma, your innermost core of your being, has actually Atma Prasidati. This is where the role model of the great souls help us. That is why in many of our classes I talk about the lives of the great souls. And what do? They have developed ahaituki apratihata Ishvara pranidhana. Causeless, unbroken worship of Ishvara they have actually achieved. How did they do it? By identifying the nature of the world. Number 18 says, what is this Prakriti, this scene? And that Prakriti is Prakasha Kriya Sthiti Sheelam, Trigunas. Bhuta Indriyatmakam, the elements and the sense organs. Bhoga Apavargartham Drishyam. So that I can either use it for liberation or I can use it for bondage. A profound statement that the drishya or the prakriti does not cause avidya. It is how I engage with the prakriti that determines whether I am encouraging my avidya to grow or I am encouraging myself to liberate myself. Apavargartham. Vishesha, avishesha, lingamatra, alingani, gunaparvani. Number 19. The gunas generate divisions. I am not generating division. Prakriti generates divisions, and the divisions that are generated in the Prakriti reflects in my mind. If I allow my mind to be reflected. See, I am standing in front of the mirror. So, two conditions are there for this mirror to reflect me, isn't it? One condition is that the mirror must be clean. So, my mind must be clean. Mind is the mirror of Prapancha. We talked about it in our last class. Now, I have got a clean mirror, but what I do is I keep moving the mirror. When the mirror is not nischalam, two conditions are required. The mirror must be nirmalam, it must be nischalam. So who makes the mirror move? Is it the Prakriti that makes the mirror of my mind move? Or is it my buddhi which is making the mirror move? Every change of the guna, the mirror from sattva, rajas, tama gunas, it keeps moving. When that movement is there, how can Purusha be reflected in the mirror of the mind? So you need something to make it stable, isn't it? So I need to have a stand. And what is that stand? That stand is the unmoving, unchanging, infinite Ishvara. Because the Prapancha is moving. So Ishvara Pranidhana. Can you see the brilliance of Patanjali? And then, and Alingani Guruparvani, and sometimes Lingamatra. Sometimes you can perceive these changes happening, distinguishable, sometimes it is indistinguishable. By tapaswadhyaya, one can get the skill of both distinguishable and indistinguishable movement. And the stabilizing factor is Ishvara Pranidhana, which is a culmination of Shaucha, Santosha, Tapaswadhyaya. Not the beginning. Beginning is okay to establish an emotional relationship with Ishtadeva. Drashta, what about the seer? The mirror is moving, the image in the mirror, the reflection in the mirror is moving, but I am not moving. It looks as though I am moving because of the movement of the mirror. That's why he says, Drashta, Drishimatraha, Shuddha api Pratyayanupashyaha. Number 20. The seer, Drashta, is pure. What do we mean by pure? Pure means he does not have any gunas which cause movement. There is no vritti, because Purusha has no vritti, it is a Chitta that has got vritti. Prakriti has got movement, but the Purusha has the anubhava of everything. Even though the Purusha is Shuddhaha api, because he is looking at his reflection in this moving mirror, he is Pratyaya Anupashyaha. Pratyaya means conceptual categories, conceptualizing the categories and characteristics. But next he raises the question, why should this Prakriti be there? Why should it keep moving like this? Why should the mind, Chittavritti, should keep changing? Only when you perceive change, you can perceive the changeless. Isn't it? Think about it. Tadastaha eva drishyasya atma. Sutra number 21 says, nature exists to show to me that nature is distinctly different from me. And nature is the one which is moving. And my mind is part of that nature. Therefore, all those movements are causing the Chitta Vritti to have Klishta Vritti. But I, the Purusha, is immovable. Achaloyam sthanuhu. And he has to establish a little bit of a philosophical note here in Sutra number 22. He says, Kritartham pratinashtam api anashtam tat anya sadharanatvat. Okay, one person has got completely separated in his Chaitanya, his Purusha. He has completely achieved the Kaivalya or the oneness, but the world should continue. For Adi Shankara, for Vivekananda, the work of Drishya is over. But what about me? The Drishya should continue constantly until such time I root out avidya. Like that, each one of us will jump off the moving train. That is all. And once I have jumped off the train in my destination, I have reached my destination, can I say the train should not go anymore? The train should continue its journey, right? I have no need for that train anymore. But the rest of the people who have to go further, they have to sit there and the train has to move. So, you see in 22, Kritartham pratinashtam api anishtam tat anya sadharanatvat. Then, what is the purpose of this contact? What is the basic purpose? Now, we talked about Drishya, the scene, the nature, guna, changing of guna, guna parva, all those we talked about it. We talked about the nature of the Purusha who is pure. But we have not talked about the purpose of this coming together, of this samyoga. So 23 addresses that question. Swaswami shaktyoho swarupopalabdhi hetuhu samyogaha. What is the purpose of this samyoga? The Purusha should gain awareness of his complete stability. So that stability can be seen only in contrast to the unstable. And the unstable Prakriti should test the limits of my ability too. And therefore, every progress that I make in my yogic path, to that extent the Prakriti will become more and more intense to create the Klishta Vritti for me. So, Swaswami Shaktyoho. How far will the Prakriti exercise its power over me? Until such time I exercise the power of separation. It is at that point of time it will let me go. So for the Purusha, as soon as he has gained his true power, then the samyoga of the drishya becomes immaterial to the Purusha, to the yogi. If you read the biography of Adi Shankara, he was 32 years old then. He has already written everything on Prasthanatraya. Last journey he makes to Kedarnath, and in the Kedarnath in the morning, he completes his teaching to his students, and he says, I will be going up in the Himalaya. My work in this world is over. None of you follow me. I have to go alone. And just walks into the mountain, into oblivion. Why did he do that? Because not only his mission was over, but also the purpose of his existence and contact with the drishya also was over. So he walks away. Chandrasekhara Bharati, the pontiff of Sringeri, 2 heads back, now Vibhudendra Shekhara and then Abhinava Bharati, his guru, Chandrasekhara Bharati, when he decided that his work is over, he just walked into the Tunga river, not to be seen. They didn't even get his body. Yogena ante tanutyajam, says Kalidasa in Raghuvamsha. Those who give up. And when does that happen? It happens for the enlightened mind who experiences the samyoga hetuhu avidya. So in the 24th sutra, Patanjali says, tasya hetuhu avidya. And once the avidya is gone, tadabhavat, number 25, tadabhavat, samyoga abhava. When avidya is not there, there is no contact with the world, then that state is drishehe kaivalyam, is liberation for the seer. When avidya becomes absent, samyoga becomes absent. There is no need for the world anymore for this yogi. And how can he achieve that? 26 says, Vivekakhyatihi aviplava hanopayaha, that is, discriminative cognition is called Vivekakhyati. Awareness of the difference between Atma and Atma. Awareness of the reality. Drashta, seer and the drishya seen are distinct and separate. When that discrimination, Viveka, Khyati, knowledge, is aviplava, that means uninterrupted. That means there is no more the chance of avidya to come back. Challenges also happen constantly for this. And those challenges are listed, if you can go back and see chapter 1, sutra number 30 and 31. Even for them, vyadi is jnana, dukkha, angamechetva, all those things will happen. But he overcomes all those things. In the last sutra that we studied last time, number 27, Tasya Saptada Pranta Bhumihi Prajna, the highest state of enlightenment is reached. And that is in 7 stages. Those 7 stages are distributed in the 8 projects of Ashtanga Yoga, which will be the subject of our next class. So this is an overview of what we have studied so far. Thank you.